over from blab.im platform, and now we're on huzzah.io. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Still the same great host and special guests like Chris Kern today. So let me really quick introduce who I am. I'm Jen from Wine Antics. I am Wine Antics because I get in enough trouble somewhere in the way. And also let me share what I'm drinking, and then I'll throw it over to our special guest, which is Chris Kern. I am drinking. I'm nursing this rosé, but I'm quite enjoying it. It's RT. Yeah, it's a little rosé from Provence, and it was $6 at Wegmans. Thumbs up.
Wow.
Nice.
Not Artea?
Artea, I guess. Looks like RT, because you know what? I'm American.
There you go.
That's how
And you're
this.
making it great again.
I am. Why not? You don't even want to hear me say some French nouns. Anyway, so we're joined by Chris Kern from
Hi, everybody.
worldsbestwineclub.com. Why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself and share what you're drinking?
Sure. I am here in lovely Paso Robles, California, the third largest wine region in California, and the hottest and the most happening, because I'm here. We are a purveyor of wine clubs, primarily for nonprofit organizations. So we work with third parties to set up fundraising wine clubs for them, and then use our Paso Robles wine partners to fulfill those clubs. I also have many other clubs based around Paso and forgotten varietals and all sorts of fun stuff. But tonight I am drinking. I've decided to stray from Paso and stray from the U.S. As you can see, it's got the eye on it. This is the Maria Sanzo 2013 Albarino from the Rias Baixas region. This was actually one of our May Forgotten Grape Wine Club selections. That's our club that focuses on lesser known and uncommon varietals. I am America's uncommon wine expert. So that club is, as Jen had said earlier, my baby, something I love, focus on, and love to introduce people to lesser known, obscure, uncommon varietals. Albarino, an up and comer, not as obscure as it once was, maybe 15 years ago, but you get great domestic and international versions of it.
Excellent.
And last but not least, Stubb.
Certainly not least. Last on the introductions, first in your heart, right?
True.
I am Stubb from corkinv.com. Jen and I have been hosting a live show together for 12 weeks now.
Wow.
So yeah, and we moved over platforms to make it easier. We're on the YouTube Live, which should make it easier for other people to watch as well. I am blogger, wine writer, lifestyle expert, and TV wine personality.
I know.
Yes, and tonight, and filmmaker. Let's not leave that out.
Esteemed director. Did you throw that one out?
Yes, director, producer of some of the finest regional wine programs ever produced.
The greatest American wine game show ever produced.
And that is true. That is a fact right there. And for that, tonight, I am drinking a Côte de Provence as my first wine. I've got another rosé open as well that I'll introduce when I decide to pour a glass of it. But this is Chateau Latour Sainte-Anne. So yeah, I love Provence rosés. I don't remember where I got this. It's a 2013, so I probably picked it up 2 years ago and forgotten about it, to be honest with you. But it is still drinking very beautifully, and I am enjoying it. And it paired well with my grilled sausages earlier. Nice. So there we go.
And
so we're
here.
here.
It's popular in Connecticut. Sorry, excited about that. It's popular here in California too, my friend.
Chris, I almost opened. I bought an Albarino this week at a wine shop, and I thought about that, and I really want to also open the Albarino that I was sent home with in January after our shoot.
Yes.
From Mr. Lazar, but I have not had an occasion to do that yet when I could do it without the rib being really upset that I tried it without her.
The mad winemaker of the Central Coast, Adam Lazar.
God of Thunder and Rock and Roll.
God of Thunder and Rock and Roll. Exactly.
Anyway, so
home of the leopard print cork, I should also add.
Very good.
Another story, another night.
That's true. Whole other episode.
So we're going to kind of go through what is the range, both the range and the evolution of wine clubs. And there's no better place to start it off with what people most connect wine clubs with. And of course, that's at the cellar door. But it's not just wineries anymore. I mean, that's most traditional, that's what everybody understands. There's a lot of value in that. And I just wanted to kind of get your feelings and do like a little comparison, start a base and then build on a comparison to what you're doing, Chris, as an online for profit and nonprofit kind of based wine club. So, what are your experiences with wine clubs at the cellar door, the traditional?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. The vast majority of wine clubs in the United States these days are those based off of wineries, are winery-based wine clubs, which are a great thing. And for wineries, it's where most of them get the bulk of their revenue from. It's regular income for them. They're able to dictate the price. They get the maximum margins on it, and they get to really decide which wines they're going to showcase and put out there. So it does help them with inventory control as well. But what's been an interesting trend over the last 10 years is the rise of the non-winery wine club, or the third-party branded wine club. And really that's where my company, World's Best Wine Clubs, has jumped into the fray. So many people are familiar with the New York Times Wine Club, Wall Street Journal, Zagat has one, Williams-Sonoma, and there's lots of wine clubs out there, but there's lots of things to be wary of with those wine clubs because they operate under a very, very different business model than your traditional winery wine club.
So, Chris, let me cut in. You mentioned, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Zagat wine clubs. Those are ones we've probably all seen either advertised on our browsers, or for those of us who still read stuff actually on printed paper, we'll see those in different publications. So, can you speak a little bit to like those clubs and how they work, and then maybe differentiate how you do your wine clubs differently?
Absolutely. And the most important thing to realize with those clubs is that they are really only related to the branded property and name only. Typically what happens is there's a third-party company that handles all the licensing, the wine selection, the shipment, the fulfillment, the compliance. And what they'll do is license the name of that particular entity, whether it be the New York Times, Zagat, Williams-Sonoma, and have that entity do the marketing for them, whether it's reaching out to their subscribers, their followers, or just using that in print ads that they put together. Interestingly enough, typically outside that licensing fee, there may be a percentage that those companies are getting, but it's not like Eric Asimov from the New York Times is going to be picking out the wines that are in the New York Times wine club. And what a lot of those clubs do is use what we call private label wines, where they have either domestic wineries or international wineries create a unique label that you won't find in any wine shop, won't find it pretty much anywhere in the world but in that club, which allows them to dictate both the quality of the wine, the price of the wine, and it makes you feel like you're getting a deal when you may not actually be doing so.
So let's say though maybe you're getting a deal on a lot of these clubs just based on price per bottle, depending on the club. If you base it solely on that, but you talked about the quality and the second labeling. I don't know. That seems a little weird to me, but we also probably should point out that there are a lot of larger wine sellers with brick and mortar retail locations who do the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's in a lot of wine shops, particularly the smaller independent wine shops will have their wine clubs as well. Again, it's a great source of recurring income because as you build up your following, you know that you're going to have that money coming in every month, bi-monthly, quarterly, and you can buy wine for that specific purpose. And you know exactly how many bottles, how many cases you need, which, can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who's operating the club. Because if it's something like my Forgotten Grapes Club, I really focus on finding great quality examples of unique varietals. And so I tend to sacrifice a little bit of margin to make sure that we're getting the best possible example of a wine in a particular varietal. Other clubs out there, will tend to find closeouts or less expensive wines and pass those along to increase their margin. And a lot of times you don't know exactly the wine you're getting. And again, you can't go on Wine Searcher or other online tools to suss out exactly what the true value of that wine is.
Cool.
And that's
So,
Chris's,
go ahead, Jen.
Sorry, no, that's just I wanted to highlight that's Chris's link for Forgotten Grapes Wine Club, and I'll make sure to put up his other two wine clubs: the World's Best Wine Club and then Paso Robles Wine Club. Best Wine
Yeah,
Club?
if you go to, pasosbestwines.com, we have our Paso Robles wine clubs based there. And as one of our commenters pointed out, Total Wine and Bevmo are doing the private label thing for retail as well. And that's important to note is there are a lot of larger entities because they can buy by the container load, which is really what you need to buy for private labels, buying 130, 150 cases at a time, where you can have your own label printed on it ends up being much more cost effective.
So we get into a weird spot with this, Chris, at least in my mind. I think as I'm going to call myself a fairly seasoned wine guy at this point in my life because I've had a lot of wine over the last several years.
There's some saltiness too, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm saying, and I think that a lot comes from experience. I find myself as, people who will ask me, hey, is this wine good? Or what wine should I buy for XYZ or occasion? I find myself sometimes stuck between the world of fine wines and kind of everyday drinking wines. And I think those two things need to be sort of looking upon, kind of taken in different contexts.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about like the bulk buys of wine clubs or these second labels or anything like that, I think we should point out that those wines aren't necessarily inferior. They're just not, they're not first growth Bordeaux. They're not 40-year-old Burgundies.
No, you're absolutely right. And typically what for a lot of them, and particularly when you see the deals where you're getting 12, 16, 18 bottles of wine, full retail value of this is $250, but we're going to send it to you for $49. There's nothing wrong with taking advantage of that, but know what you're getting into, which is that you're going to most likely be getting wines that, like I said, are private label wines, typically wines, particularly if they're European, that are on the less expensive end of things. Sure. So there may be quality issues, but of course, as you know, and as Jen knows, and all wine drinkers know, is there are $10 bottles and $12 bottles that are superior in flavor and quality to $30, $40, $50 bottles.
Absolutely.
So it's really a case of buyer beware. For me, when I'm dealing with a wine club, I like to mitigate risk. So I like to go in with more of a known quantity, whether that's a winery that I know, or if it's a third-party wine club, I want to have somebody there, either by picture, by tasting note, who I can contact, who I know is curating the wines and is picking them out. So a trusted individual. It's something that I try to do with my clubs is make myself available via videos, via email, and always put this handsome face, with our clubs, so that people know what they're getting, that they can trust me, they know my background. And that's, unfortunately, that's the problem that some people fall into with the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times Club and others, is they're assuming that the wine writers, the Letty Teagues, the Eric Asimovs of the world have some say, have some input in these clubs, when in fact, like I said, it's typically a third party that's running them, and it's strictly a licensing play for the entity.
And it can be multiple big names could be selling their licensing and their label to the same consulting company. So you'd be surprised at how many of these bigger newspaper or maybe even online outlets are using their name and leveraging it and selling it to just 5 people that curate your entire wine list. So you really got to know, just like anything, buyer beware. You need to know who's sourcing your wine list when you consider a wine club.
Yeah, and as one of our commenters pointed out, there can be a bit of a bait and switch in terms of
Yeah.
offering you those initial wines for a really low price. It's the old Columbia House model. You're going to get 10 CDs for a penny. Take the penny here and send it in. But then you've got to buy the next 10 CDs at full club price. And oh, by the way, you're not going to get to select what you want. So here's Al Jarreau's greatest hits coming to you.
There's nothing wrong with putting on a little Al Jarreau CD and getting busy.
Fair
I'm just
enough.
saying. Yeah,
it might be a Bossia CD or whatever it was. But the same thing is
step by step, heart to heart, my friend.
There you go. Or the latest Amy Grant track.
Nice.
Hey. Amy
Sorry,
Grant,
nice.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, that's fine.
So it is by everywhere, and again, the other issue, and this is also a Trader Joe's issue and occasionally a Costco issue, is if you find a wine in a particular club shipment that you absolutely love, odds are you're not going to be able to get it again because it's a club exclusive and they've bought just so much to send out to their club. So there's really no way for you to get more of that. Unlike with a winery club where typically, the whole idea is to send you wines to try so that you'll buy additional bottles from them at the full retail price.
And then also be excited that they're going to send you more stuff that you might like because they won 1 out of 6 wines in your shipment.
Yeah, although it's very interesting because if you look at the research, a typical winery wine club member only stays in a club about 18 to 24 months, which, with a typical two times a year shipment is really only about 4 shipments. Now, it's great for the winery, but the whole idea is that wine clubs are really, they're like sharks. They have to be constantly moving, constantly recruiting because you have that built-in attrition. And that's something for people to bear in mind as well. An interesting trend on the winery wine club side that I have seen is they're starting to go more towards pick your own wines to avoid that disappointment of, giving you wines that you may have already had, or if the new vintage tastes exactly like the old vintage, giving you the option of buying multiple bottles of a particular wine within a club shipment that you might like.
And they're doing that, I'm guessing, to keep you kind of hooked in and communicating with the winery. So do you feel like they're doing that, just personally, Chris, and Jen, jump on this too. Are wineries doing that from a marketing perspective of you get more towards like beer drinkers, like saying, hey, I love Miller Lite or I love Coors, so that's what I drink. And I want every vintage of this wine to taste like the last vintage I had. So are we talking about more or less experienced wine drinkers for these clubs?
Well, that's a great question. And most clubs have a really wide gamut of both experienced drinkers, people who sort of jumped on the club early, who are members of lots of different clubs. And then obviously you get a lot of people who visit a tasting room, sign up for the club just for the perks, or, maybe because it's the 4th or 5th winery they're visiting that day and they're having a lot of fun. And they, we don't know anybody who's like that. And then you tend to forget about it. And, that's really what wineries and wine club managers like myself kind of are anticipating, is that you're going to forget about the membership. And by the time your credit card is charged, it's such a hassle to return the shipment, to cancel the shipment, that you'll just go ahead and go through with it. But it is that repetition of the same wines, even in new vintages, are what tend to turn wine club members off. If you look at the feedback that they get and in the research, that tends to be the number one killer for people quitting wine clubs or the number one reason for people quitting wine clubs is they just are tired of that particular winery's wines. Even if they like them, there's only so much you can take getting the same ones over and over again, and they want to try something new, which is why the beauty of the third-party model is you're able to offer a wide variety of new wines, different wineries, different varietals every time, something new, and keep it fresh for people.
And that's a really good segue. I'm just going to insert one little point about if you are a wine club member from a winery, contact the wine club management, the staff, the person that's behind the wine club, I found that if you're getting bored or you don't feel like you have enough control as a consumer to the offerings you're getting, if you contact them, they tend to want to work with you because attrition is horrible for wine clubs. Like not being able to keep the retention up is their worst enemy. So they want to help you as a consumer. They want to satisfy what you need within reason. But I would love to talk about third-party wine clubs, like what you're doing, especially how wine clubs are not only helping individuals, but how they're helping organizations fundraise for nonprofits as well as for-profit organizations. I'd love to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of in a brave new frontier here, to mix metaphors and book titles, because there's not a lot of companies that are really doing what we're doing, which is working closely with nonprofits to set up fundraising wine clubs with them, and that act as a fundraiser for them. So in essence, there's no downside to a nonprofit starting a wine club, particularly if it's something like ours, because there's no upfront cost. We're out there picking the wines. They don't have to worry about licensing or taxation or any of those issues. And it's basically recurring money for them. So a lot of nonprofits that rely on a single gala, and you guys know this, if anybody has attended a nonprofit gala, wine is always the number one focus of it, whether it's serving it, whether they're having raffles for wine. One of my new favorite raffles I keep hearing about is they get the volunteers to donate 52 bottles of wine, and you buy a playing card for $100 or $500 or whatever it is, and they take the deck, shuffle it, and they start pulling off cards. And when your card is shown, you're eliminated until you get to the last two cards, and whoever is the last card standing gets all 52 bottles of wine. So it's basically an instant wine cellar right there. Now, of course, the problem is if you've got volunteers buying, you may have a lot of, $2 Chucks and $3 Janes and whatnot. But occasionally you'll find some good stuff in those. But wine has always been a driver for nonprofits in terms of how they operate their galas and their fundraisers. So it seemed like wine clubs was just a natural progression for that. And we're starting to see some really positive results. We launched this about a year ago, and we're already up to 16 different nonprofits around the country that we work with. And we're getting great response from it.
Cool. So, Chris, you do 16 wine clubs. I want to do full disclosure here. Chris and I are friends, and we've collaborated on some business projects as well. And
we also were lovers from 2002 to 2004, but that's neither here nor there.
We weren't going to talk about that on air.
Sorry, you said full disclosure.
I mean, not that I'm ashamed or anything.
It was more just cuddling. There wasn't any,
No, but I know. I will say this also. I've been with Chris when he's picked up his own shipments from individual wine clubs, winery clubs he's a member of. I've been with him when he's tasted and is selecting wines to give to the various clubs. How do you personally, Chris, because I know you vet every bottle of wine for all of your wine clubs.
Absolutely.
Personally. And you pick them for a reason. I think probably some of them are economic, but you also, I think most of those decisions for you though are, I think the economic decision is what level did this club sign up at? Like, are they having people come in at $40 a quarter or $100 a quarter or whatever for the shipments? So that those economics come in, but you also try to choose for, I guess, the demographics of the specific club.
Yeah, and that's always difficult because there's so many different people in a particular club. What I tend to do when I pick a wine, and this is going to sound very selfish, but I tend to curate it for my own tastes.
Right.
I like to think that I know what a good wine is, and I have a pretty good palate.
Right.
Others would call me on that, I'm sure, but that's okay. But I tend to find interesting wines that I like from interesting wineries that have a fantastic story behind them. So really unique winemakers, interesting labels, wineries with a very unique story about how they got started or the story behind the name of a particular wine. Anything that I can use to really enhance a bottle of wine that people are going to get, I think is important when you're putting together a wine club shipment, because more often than not, people are going to take those bottles and take them out to a party or a dinner or whatnot. And if you can give them just that little piece of information that they can share with a friend, pass along to whoever they're dining with, it goes a long way to making them feel better, making them feel, dare I say, superior or kind of in the know. And particularly with the wineries we use, which tend to be very small, boutique, 3,000 case or less wineries that don't have wide distribution or in many cases, any distribution at all. It really adds value to what people are getting. And some of our commenters have had some great points, which is that perks are a huge thing for wine clubs, particularly on the winery side. And we're starting to see more and more wineries building separate tasting rooms for members, having more pickup parties for members to come with food and bands and all sorts of rigmarole. And many perks in addition to just the discounts that you get the day that you sign up and walk out with your membership and your wine to keep you in that club going forward. And that's really the name of the game. And the smart wineries out there, the smart wine clubs, will really engage with their members to get feedback, give them those value adds, and really keep them engaged in getting each shipment of wine so they're looking for it. So they're not necessarily forgetting about it, but they're really looking forward to that next shipment.
Right. So, Chris, you do a lot of your work in Paso with, I know in Paso with a lot of the wineries there, but I know some of your wine clubs you're pulling from other sources as well, and distributors and other importers you work with. But I know, I'm gonna guess that the Beagle Freedom Project is one of your largest wine clubs,
Yes.
which is not only close to your heart, but your girlfriend's as well.
It is.
Which I'll give you an opportunity to talk about her if you want. But you also choose wines from wineries who are also interested in the causes that you are, the nonprofits you're working with. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We try to find, particularly for, the Beagle Freedom Project Club, as you mentioned, was one of the first ones that we launched with. We have a Beagle Freedom Project dog. Percival was tested on for his first 18 months in a laboratory in Northern California. BFP is working to basically end animal testing for all animals, but primarily beagles, which are the main, up with monkeys, rats, and rabbits are one of the big four creatures that are tested on. And then they're also at a lower level, sort of a smaller step level, trying to make sure that anybody who does test on animals, if they have healthy animals, they aren't just destroyed flat out, which is the common practice these days. But if they're animals that are healthy and adoptable, that they're given a chance to be adopted before they're destroyed. But we've had great success with the Beagle Freedom Project Wine Club. And yeah, it really makes it easy if you can find wineries, and fortunately there are a ton of them out there that are dog friendly, that love dogs, that are very supportive of animal rights, and the beauty for us is they love to be involved and are willing to really help us out in terms of the wines they're giving us. A lot of times we'll get like some people were saying, the wine club exclusives, the wines that they'll hold back just for club members, they'll give us access to those wines because, again, it's a benefit for them because they're putting those wines in the hands of people who get their story and are more likely to become fans and eventual members of their own club.
Right. And you've also, if I can add, you've also been able to get, especially some of the local wineries you work with, to help you hold events for certain of these certain fundraising events and things as well, right?
Yeah, and there's nothing better. In fact, most wine clubs thrive on having those live tasting events because people are always very wary of buying wines that they've never tasted or never heard of before. So if you can put the wine in their hand, get them to try it, you're increasing your potential of getting them to buy or become a member 20-fold. And we try to work with our nonprofits as much as possible to either help them stage pickup parties where people can taste the wines, and they can invite non-members to come and taste the wines before sign up for the club, or if they're having a gala, to have a station there, a table to allow people to taste the wines and sign up right there on the spot.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. It's not too bad a model. I get to drink on the job, which has its perks.
I mean, that is the greatest reason to be in the wine industry, in my opinion. You
It's
get
what
to
keeps us
drink
coming
on
back
the
for more.
you
I
get to
like
drink on the job.
I,
exactly.
I think we've hit the evolution and the range of wine clubs, and I really thank you, Chris, not only for coming on, but graciously answering the stream of questions and really engaging. So I think we're
My
gonna.
pleasure.
Oh yeah, and I think
Thank
we're
you for
gonna.
having me. I appreciate it. This is a lot of fun. Hopefully, some folks learn some things about wine clubs, which will make you think
Right.
the next time you're at a winery or flipping through a magazine and see an interesting wine club. And
Right.
again, if you're interested in helping out some really deserving nonprofits and getting some really great wines from the Central Coast of California, check out worldsbestwineclubs.com. You can click on any of the 16 different clubs we have, sign up. Most clubs are $99 4 times a year, so super affordable. And at least 25% of that is going to go directly back to that nonprofit that you're going to support.
Thank you. Absolutely. And
Indeed.
for everybody else, thank you for joining us out
Yes.
on YouTube Live and here on Huzzah.io. Wine Antics Live will be every Thursday at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, 6:30 Pacific Standard Time. Next week, we'll have Chef Dennis with some food and wine pairing. Good night,
Indeed.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night,
Cheers.
all.